not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Dan. It's fairly more normal, particularly as I've avoid muzzle places. But, you know, schools are now back. Life is slowly returning to normal. How about yourself?
Yeah, all's well with me. Yeah, I do believe the schools are back, although they're perhaps not all back full time at the moment. But I do believe schools in the area have broadly gone back, as it were, after the very, very long summer break on this occasion. I think it's pretty much half a year. And certainly Hewitt's in the town centre here in Croydon, which sells a lot of things like school uniforms and school gym kits and stuff like that. I've noticed very large queues outside of that shop in the last couple of weeks. So people are certainly gearing up to going back to school anyway.
Very much so.
So Mike, what have we got to discuss today?
So today we're discussing the omni-shambles that is Croydon Council, Brexit and the latest on that and what's happening with the Board of Trade, some protests that have been going on of various types and what's acceptable and what's not. The US elections coming through soon and a little bit of an update on them. Talking about the BBC and whether it's got a death wish, and talking about some of the latest updates on our website. Indeed.
So yes, Croydon Council, you referenced the omni-shambles. It's certainly going from bad to worse at the moment. We've talked previously about the deficit, and indeed we talked about it recently on a podcast that you might want to listen to. But yes, Joe Negrini, the very well paid chief executive of the council, has finally resigned following revelations about the size of the council deficit and that the fact that they're possibly going to have to issue a Section 114 order, which means that only essential spending will be allowed. And so it looks like they're in a bad way and almost about to go bankrupt. Also at this time, completely unrelated, I might add, the Conservatives now have a new group leader on the council. Mike, what do we know about Jason Perry?
So Councillor Jason Perry, Councillor for South Croydon, has been a councillor there for quite a long time, I believe. He's probably a fairly prominent councillor over a number of years. He was selected in the last week or so, and a couple of changes to the top team. Alongside Jason Perry, Jason Cummings is still on sort of the top table as a deputy leader, but so is Councillor Lynn Hall, and she's new to that. She has, however, been a councillor also for over 30 years. Oh, no, sorry, she's lived in Southampton here for over 30 years, but she's been a councillor for a long time as well. So some pretty senior councillors there, a new face on the top table for the Conservatives. Jason Perry, I think a stable, if not necessarily exciting prospect, perhaps. But, you know, maybe that's what the Conservatives need. There's going to be enough excitement in the financial disaster of Croydon Council as things go already.
Indeed. With the council looking like it's going to declare effectively bankruptcy in the next few months, it's going to be a very interesting time politically between now and the next local elections, which are scheduled for May 2022 here in Croydon. But of course, whilst all this is going on, there have been some developments with the campaign for a democratically elected mayor for Croydon. What's the latest on that, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Democ campaign, which is looking to change the way we elect a the leader of Croydon Council. At the moment, the leader of Croydon Council's is appointed or is elected, if you like, by the councillors of the winning party. We're changing it to a system whereby they are directly elected by the people of Croydon. So it's moving to a model similar to London, but also Lewisham, Watford, Haringey, no, not Haringey, quite a few other councils around the country. Sorry. So we had to trigger that. And I'm going to say we here a few times because I'm been on the campaign committee for them. Needed to collect a large number of signatures, more than 5% of the electorate, to trigger a referendum. And that's what we've now done. They've collected over 20,000 signatures. The actual number needed was 13,000 or so. The number that are verified and confirmed is slightly lower than that. So there's a number of signatures and a number that we verified that have been handed into the council, well clear of the target. What that's now done is set the challenge for the council to set a referendum in May next year to decide whether we want to have an elected mayor or not. Now, I've got involved in this because I believe Croydon Council is broken in many ways, as the recent information's kind of shown, but also because in Croydon we're a very split borough, north and south, Labour, Conservative. And there's no one that really represents the whole borough. One party, each party, depending on who's in power, represents only really their half in terms of appointees. I think if we get a mayor, they're going to have to win votes everywhere and they're going to have to take a wider borough view. And again, no matter what party they are, that will be true. So we've handed in a petition this week, lots of publicity locally, which is great. The people handing it in were a mixture of the Conservative MP for Croydon South, Chris Philp, the Labour Vice Chair for Croydon South, Joanne, and various other people from the Labour Party and some Conservative councillors. Loads of people from different residents' associations were there. So they've handed in that petition, lots of bits of paper, lots of boxes of paper. The council now has to verify that. And this is where it gets a bit murky. There isn't really a clear timeline on when the council has to verify that. The committee's effectively, I think, asked for a month. They get it done in. And then they can trigger off and start the ball rolling for the election next May. We shall see what the council does with it now. I would hate to think that they would hide behind excuses and COVID and financials to not verify this referendum. It will happen next year with other local elections, so the cost will be marginal. So yeah, hopefully we get the chance, and everyone listening to this in Croydon will see over the next few months more information on the campaign of why we want a mayor.
Excellent. Well, it'll certainly be a very interesting contest. Well, it'll be an interesting argument between the yes and the no campaign, effectively, and then should the referendum campaign be successful, it'll be interesting to see who puts themselves forward for the directly elected mayor. Whether we'll be the usual faces, or whether there'll be any sort of outsiders or almost celebrities, perhaps, who might put themselves forward. But certainly there's going to have to be some changes at Croydon Council, given what's been going on with the financials. So yeah, we'll watch this space.
There's a really important point there, actually. Jonah Greeny's gone. The council's bankrupt. That she's in charge from an administrative point of view. That makes sense for her to go. But from a political point of view, Tony Newman's in charge. When's he going? When's the chief treasury people in the council, Simon, I can't remember his surname, when's he going? When are the other senior cabinet members going? You know, a lot of these finances are down to the brick by brick. When's Alison Butler going? You know, they're elected people, they would still be councillors, but how are the Labour Party and how are the Labour backbenchers in Croydon Council looking at their front bench and saying this is a credible set of people to represent our party and to run our town? You've got to hope at some point they put the borough before their party and take some action. Well, in fact, I would say they represent both the borough and the best interests of their party and take some action against them.
Certainly hope so. Well, Brexit rumbles on. We're now just a few months away from the end of the transition period. and there've been some rumblings that we're going to go for a WTO Brexit, as it were, a no-deal Brexit at the end of December, due to the machinations of the EU's negotiating position, where they are seemingly refusing to discuss normal free trade discussions because they are fixated with the issue of fishing rights, and also wanting this level playing field scenario. So although there is some talk of the Michel Barnier being sidelined, and possibly some EU leaders, actual national leaders, getting involved, because they want to move past this and make sure that whatever deal may be capable of being done before the end of December is as frictionless as possible for of course their tradespeople. They want to sell us cars, etc. But on a wider front, in terms of international trade, there've been some announcements of appointees to a new board of trade. It's an old phrase we used to have many decades ago, but one of the interesting people that's been appointed is Tony Abbott. Now, Tony Abbott used to be the Australian Prime Minister, and whilst he was the Prime Minister of Australia, they were able to strike quite a few trade deals with the likes of China and Korea and Japan, and there were a few more that he had had a hand in, which were formally signed after he left office. All sounds very good, you'd think. Not so, by the sound of it, of what some of the opponents are saying. Mike, it's caused a bit of an uproar amongst some groups.
Yeah, it does rather seem as if Sky News particularly decided they want to sort of try a takedown on the former Prime Minister of Australia. Now, Australia is one of our closest allies, a part of Five Eyes. They're obviously part of the Commonwealth. Many of us have family out there. Many of us have visited Australia. It's a country we have hugely close connections with, and yet, if you're the wrong sort of politician in Australia, apparently you're not welcome to partake in any action with the British government. It's part of the cancel culture, and for once, and it's pretty rare I'm saying this at the moment, you've got to praise Boris and the government for standing firm and cancelling the cancel culture and appointing Tony Abbott to this position. I would say if they hadn't appointed him, I don't think they'd have been able to appoint anyone to anything else, frankly. He's controversial because he's conservative. That's not controversial. That's being conservative. It's a position that got him elected. It's a position that's got a stonking majority for the government here. We need to stop listening to left-wing wokeriety who pretend that everything's controversial that they don't like. It's not controversial. It's kind of the common fact, and that's just really what they don't like. So great news that he's there. I have to point out as well, Daniel Hannan. There's an inspired choice. Very, very pleased to see him on the Board of Trade. Pleased that the government has decided to make use of his skills and just capability and his ability to communicate as well. Someone like him on there, not just having a good input to what it is they do, but also being able to perhaps project out to the wider public, because he's an excellent communicator and was a really important part of the Brexit process, I thought.
Yes, no, congratulations to Dan Hannan as well. Yeah, an excellent appointment. But on this Tony Abbott issue, the issue that the left has seemingly jumped upon was his opposition to gay marriage, to same-sex marriage, equal marriage, call it what you want. Of course, this was some time ago that he expressed those opinions, and Australia has subsequently had a referendum on the issue, and sort of 60-odd% voted for it, and it's now in place in Australia. And yet he's being accused of homophobia, of rabid homophobia. This is notwithstanding the fact that his own sister is a lesbian, and indeed has subsequently taken advantage of the ability to get married to another woman, and she's had nothing but kind words to say about her brother. Well, yes, you would think she would possibly because he's her brother, but it seems to be that he's, you say he's conservative leanings on a number of issues seem to be what's what his opponents are really up against, really against, but they seem to have just jumped on this one, relatively minor issue, but it's just because it's something that the woke classes are really concerned about.
It's really important to remember at this stage as well with these things that Barack Obama campaigned for election and re-election saying that he wasn't in favour of gay marriage. Now, that's not a million years ago that happened. That's pretty recently. The gay marriage over here was not popular until it was passed, and then it became popular. There was quite a lot of Labour MPs that voted against it, as well as a number of Conservatives, although the Conservatives and the coalition government brought it in. Of course, Tony Blair only passed civil partnerships because he wasn't ready to pass gay marriage. And when I was in Australia last year, I happened to be out chatting to some people, and they mentioned about the referendum for gay marriage, and I hadn't even realised they'd held one. And they could barely remember what they voted, but a couple of people had sort of said, yeah, I voted against it. And they were quite happy to say they voted against it. And no one was shocked. No one was surprised. It wasn't controversial, particularly, that some people had voted against it and some people for it, and others for it, in this particular group that I was in. And it's not a controversial thing in perhaps the way some people want to make it out to be. It is also, he's a committed Christian, like lots and lots of people in this country. Christianity doesn't have the holding it once did, but most committed people of every religion are generally against gay marriage in its forms. Now, I personally couldn't care less who gets married and who doesn't get married. But for those people that do, it's not a controversial point of view, and we can't, respect for one group can't be to say everyone of every religion is excluded from a conversation. You can't serve on the board of trade because you're a Catholic. Is effectively what they were saying. That cannot be the way to go forward in Britain. And I say, really good news that it certainly in this case it isn't.
Well, yeah, you mentioned you can do certain things if you think one way, but you can't do them if you think another way, which moves us nicely on to our next subject, which is about the recent protests that we've seen in London and indeed elsewhere. We had an anti-lockdown protest recently, decent turnout from what I can see, but one of the organisers, Piers Corbyn, yes, that's the brother of Jezza. He's gone and got himself fined £10,000 for organising it. Perfectly peaceful protest. Apparently, it contravened certain COVID regulations. Therefore, as the organiser, he has been fined. Yet we've not seen fines as yet for the organisers of BLM protests and indeed some of the Extinction Rebellion protests that have been going on just in this past week. Mike, what do you make of this?
It's fundamental part of justice that it's equal for all. Now, we always know that there are, if you're rich and you can afford a fancy lawyer, life's probably better for you than if you can't afford a fancy lawyer. We all know if you fit certain demographics, statistically you're likely to be in a better place than other demographics. But nonetheless, that's kind of at the margins, and it's dealing with people and kind of really quite intractable problems. In the core, if you commit a crime or I commit a crime, we should both be charged and treated in the same way. It shouldn't be a case that it's different if the crime's fashionable. So it's not fashionable to protest against masks, but it is fashionable to protest for Black Lives Matter or for Extinction Rebellion. Therefore, they're let off and the mask protesters are charged. That's wrong, completely wrong. It's slightly terrifying as well, because what it means is people lose respect for the law. And as people lose respect for the law, you see policemen under attack. You see people, police not able to provide a service because there's far more of us than there are of the police, and people will just go and break the law if they think they can get away with it, or if they think the police won't apply the law fairly. And you'll see a breakdown of trust in society, and that's, we are a high trust society, and that's what makes Britain and much of the Western world run so well. If only there was a Conservative government in place that would, you think, respect a rule of law and respect people's right to free speech and to protest. But having said something nice about him earlier, I think Boris Johnson and his government are proving woefully absent on this issue.
Indeed. Well, one has to look to perhaps leaders of other political parties other than the Conservatives for guidance on how we should behave in such circumstances. Caroline Lucas, the leader of the Green Party, for example, who was spoke at one of the recent Extinction Rebellion rallies in central London. She was definitely complying with the COVID regulations, wasn't she, Mike?
She was. Now, I would not normally say something nice about the Green Party, but I'm really pleased that Caroline Lucas has gone out there and said this lockdown's ridiculous. We just need to get on. We need to stop pretending that every little snivel is COVID, and we need to, get out there and get to the pox party. Which is apparently what she did in an Extinction Rebellion protest. No, I mean, I am sceptical of the lockdown, but actually, if you're not feeling well, stay in. There's been a pandemic, don't you know? To go out with a dry cough at a protest that's illegal, and it shouldn't be illegal, and she should absolutely be out there at that protest. Good for her. I don't think the protest should be blocking roads or ambulances or printing presses as they've been doing. But if you're peacefully protesting, fantastic. But if you're not well, don't go out. There's been a pandemic, for crying out loud. Just in case, just let's not take the risk. Go to the next one. Astonishing behaviour from her. And here's a bit of a theme. It is one rule for them and another for us. If it's a fashionable protest, they'll let it happen. It's one rule for them. If it's unfashionable, one of our protests, no, you get fined. If you're ill and you're Caroline Lucas, an MP, you go out. If you're one of us, no. If someone was ill in a pub that you were in, but you're perfectly fine, you're locked down. You go on holiday, you're locked down. It is one rule for during the height of the pandemic. If you're an advisor for the Prime Minister, being a scientific or a political one, you can gallivate around the country. You can see your lover. The rest of us were locked indoors. The elite don't like the people. And I must admit, I thought the Conservatives and Boris's Conservatives might be different on that from May's and the opposition. Not seeing it.
Well, we had our general election back in December, and as you mentioned, the stonking majority was achieved by Boris. But of course, there's another set of important elections coming up in November in the United States. Donald Trump is standing for re-election on the Republican ticket, but his opponent is now going to be confirmed, is now going to be Joe Biden. And at the recent virtual Democratic Party convention, he has announced his running mate will be Kamala Harris, who's going to be the candidate for vice president. Mike, what do you know about Kamala?
So I think it's Kamala Harris.
Is it?
As in a comma, yes. I listen to lots of US politics podcasts, and that's one of the few things I've picked up on her. Kamala Harris spent a lot of time during the primaries saying that Biden had consorted with racists in his younger days, and the people who accused him of inappropriate sexual behaviour should be believed. And now she's his VP pick. Now, either she didn't mean those things when she said quite vile things about him, in which case, frankly, she's not appropriate for public office, or she did mean them and she's decided not to care when she's picked as a VP pick, in which case she's inappropriate for public office. It's got to be one of those two, hasn't it? It can't be the case that you think the man's a racist and has committed some sexual assault, but he's all right to be president. Of course, he's not really all right to be president because, unfortunately, Joe Biden is clearly suffering signs of dementia of some sort. I don't pretend to be a clinician and say what it is, but he's not with it. He's not the man he was even 4 or 5 years ago. That's going to become clear. And you mentioned the DNC. Normally, when you have a conference in the States, you get a bump. So you have, I think that's pretty true here as well, actually. But running up to a presidential election, you have your conference, you get a poll bump. Then the other party has their conference and they get a poll bump. And then you look at the polls again. So you go 2 or 3 weeks without really looking at them because you know they're in that conference period. Well, the Democrats had a conference and they lost support. The Republicans had a conference and they gained support. That's not good for the Democrats, not a good look. And yeah, it's because they haven't really put up great candidates.
No, it is interesting to see that the Republicans, well, Donald Trump does seem to have had a bit of a bounce after his virtual convention, but the Biden campaign didn't seem to get that bounce at all. So it's I think Biden's still slightly ahead in most polls, but it has certainly tightened quite a lot, and of course. One of those things, perhaps tightening those polls, might be some of the scenes that we've seen in recent weeks on the streets of various US cities, where Democratic Party mayors and governors are simply refusing to enforce the law against people who are suggesting they are Black Lives Matter protesters or Extinction Rebellion protesters or Lord knows what, but essentially they are rioting half the time. So I think if you're concerned about such matters, you're going to be leaning more towards Trump now, more than ever, I think.
It seems as if the Democrats, and bear in mind, all these cities are happening all these riots, and they are riots. CNN might call them largely peaceful protests as they stand in front of burning buildings, but let's call them what they are, riots. These riots, so they're in Democratic-controlled cities, largely in Democrat-controlled states. So Trump and the federal government are not in a position to go in and deal with them. They can offer help, they can protect federal buildings, but they can't just go in and clear the streets. That's the job of state and local law enforcement. So they're on the Democrats, these riots. It appears they let them run because they thought this general sense of trouble would be bad for Trump. It appears this general sense of trouble was actually bad for the Democrats. They're now noticing that in the polling, and they now might want to do something about it. But, shocking state of affairs that you would let your cities burn because you think there's a political advantage to it. And I sort of think that the narrowing of the polling is rather the case that people have caught that's going on. I also, just my gut instinct is that you vote, when you're worried about law and order, you vote for the right-wing party. In the case of the Americans, that's the Republicans. Over here, you'd vote Conservative. When you're worried about health services, you'll probably vote for the left-wing party. But if the Americans are worried about this trouble in their cities, then that's only going to really benefit the Republicans come election time.
Yeah, and of course the economy in America generally is starting to wake up again. So if that trend continues for the next couple of months, people might feel a bit better off and maybe more inclined again to vote for the incumbent, and perhaps against some of the radical tax raising issues that seem to be coming out from the Biden campaign, and certainly there's the fear, as you mentioned, of with Biden's state, shall we say, that these people like I want to call them occasional cortex or whatever her name is, but the
AOC, yes, yes.
AOC, the representative from New York. She's, with these extraordinarily, basically communist environmental positions, people are going to be less inclined towards that and more inclined towards the incumbent president if there's more money in their pockets. So it'll be interesting times. But you mentioned earlier about how it seems to be one rule for one lot of people and another for the rest of us. Well, Nancy Pelosi, the Democrat who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives and one of the main driving forces, or certainly at least officially one of the main driving forces behind the proposed impeachment of Donald Trump, she's got herself into a little bit of bother, hasn't she, Mike?
Nancy's gone full Marie Antoinette, hasn't she? So Nancy Pelosi, as you say, normally I thought quite a sensible figure within the Democrats, or a shrewd figure rather than sensible. That's perhaps a better word. She didn't get on with AOC and the gang that she's in. I can't remember what they're called, but very much because her view is that if you're in a very heavily Democrat seats, your job is to try and get the people in with small majorities or in marginal seats across the line and make sure they keep winning. AOC's view is that she's in a very Democratic seat, so her job is to campaign even more on even more extreme positions. Now, I think ultimately most of us would know which one's likely to secure you a majority. But they've got a majority at the moment. She's the Speaker of the House, as you say. Not long ago, she did an interview sitting in front of sort of a $75,000 refrigerator, eating custom-made ice cream that she had a massive drawer full of, that would be more than sort of most people's month's salary of ice cream. And she, clearly shown herself to be completely out of touch in the way she came across and presented herself there. Now, of course, she's advocating more mask wearing, and if you've heard this before, it's the same. It's the same in the US as it is here. Advocating more mask wearing. She goes for a haircut, which you're allowed to do, wearing a mask, one customer at a time, and of course, she doesn't wear a mask. It's pretty clear that she feels those rules are for them, not for her. They're for the others, they're for the people, not for the likes of her. I don't blame her not wearing a mask. I don't like wearing a mask. I think muzzles should be banned. Well, not banned, sorry. I think there should not be forced to wear muzzles anywhere. If people want to wear them. Yeah, it's up to you. But don't force me to. And she feels the same way as me, except she's actually forcing others to wear them. It could backfire on her quite a big way, and it's a really good picture that represents how she's so far out of touch with normal Americans. The little extra bit to this, of course, Dan, is that she's gone full lawyer and accused the hairdresser of fitting her up, of trapping her into this photo. Not only is she proposing rules for normal Americans that she doesn't want to follow herself, she's using it as an opportunity to take down a hard-working small business on Main Street. Not a good look at all.
No, well, you mentioned about people who want to force their opinions on us, and that brings us on very nicely to our old friends at the British Broadcasting Corporation. It's the last night of the proms soon. Although it's not going to be as it usually is, for understandable reasons, there is not going to be a huge crowd in the Royal Albert Hall, waving flags and all that sort of thing. But it was going to be a little bit different again from that. They weren't going to be allowed to sing "Land of Hope and Glory" or "Rule Britannia." Apparently, they were seemingly using the excuse that there isn't the crowd there for that reason, but did rather stink of being a bit woke and a bit concerned about the BLM and being on all of that sort of bandwagon. Anyway, when it was announced that that was what was going to be the case. The I think it was Land of Hope and Glory. I think went to #1 on the iTunes chart, so the downloads chart, as it were. As people obviously stays effectively a commercial protest there about that. But it sounds like they are actually going to now. They've given in on this one. Oh, how good of them to that they will be singing the Land of Hope and Glory and Rule Britannia on this occasion. Well, thank you very much for that. But yeah, it just strikes me that a needless suggestion. Just at a time when the people's concerns about the BBC and its impartiality and the way it's funded, it just seems like a bit of an own goal, Mike.
The BBC is, it either just doesn't see itself in the way that anyone else sees it, or doesn't understand the way that other people see it, or it's actively trying to get itself shut down. We talk about cancel culture a lot these days. Maybe it's trying to cancel itself. It's quite unbelievable that why pick this fight? Why pick this fight? There's all sorts of things at the BBC that they can do, that they are doing, agendas they can push. You get one night of the year when people wave some Union Jacks and sing some patriotic songs. And they look at that and they go, oh, no, we can't have that. We've got to have that one as well. We've taken down everything else. I used to watch the BBC many years ago. I remember thinking I watched the BBC for two reasons, Andrew Neil and Jeremy Clarkson. Of course, Jeremy Clarkson promptly goes and gets himself sacked after punching someone, which is probably not unreasonable. He left for that reason. And then eventually they've effectively forced Andrew Neil out. So I don't watch the BBC. I don't fund it anymore, I'm pleased to say. But that's not enough for them. They can't get rid of the only people that most people on the right sort of really enjoyed watching. They've got to take it a step further and get rid of this. Quite unbelievable. And of course, they talked about a property tax being used to replace the license fee. No one will pay to watch your service. In fact, I won't watch live TV now. That's fine. That's not actually a big sacrifice for me, but I won't watch live TV because I don't want to pay the license fee. So the BBC's decided they want to put it as a property tax to pay for them elsewhere. They haven't got a clue, have they? Not got a clue.
Well, exactly. And at a time when, there's a campaign out there to defund the BBC, obviously using the phraseology from defund the police, but there's been campaigns that we've talked about before in terms of axe the telly tax and things like that. And with all these things out there like Netflix and Amazon Prime and others, the whole structure of how you receive your televisual, if you want to call it that, entertainment has just completely changed. It's now far more streaming services, far more on demand. But the BBC has got this whole antiquated way of doing things and how it's funded. And when they've sort of perhaps twigged that, the end of the license fee may be near, they've gone with, maybe we could just tax every household anyway. Yes, that's going to be popular, isn't it? No, I think the BBC, as you say, it's been picking fights. It just, why would you pick a fight? Why would you pick a fight? And why would you pick that fight? And why would you pick that fight at this particular time? It just seems to me like they're shooting themselves in the foot. Maybe they just want us to put them out of their misery. I don't know, but yeah,
it is like that. Just picking up on this fight as well. Now it's not the sort of thing you'd necessarily poll beforehand, but Matthew Goodwin, excellent pollster, looking at his Twitter feed, he's got a measure here from the YouGov poll about the Land of Hope and Glory and Rule Britannia. Out of all voters, they thought the BBC was right to stop to perform it without lyrics. 16%, 55% thought it was wrong. Out of Remainers, 41% thought it was wrong, and out of Leavers, 78% thought it was wrong. So even Remainers, so the people who, I might be reasonable to characterise as least likely to be waving the Union Jack on last night at the Proms, most of them thought it was wrong, or a plurality thought it was wrong. And then you look at another poll here. Do you have a favourable or unfavourable opinion of the BBC? favourable 48, unfavourable 44. So there's a favourable majority there. That's good for the BBC. When you break that down, though, Remainers, it's 64% favourable and 31 unfavourable. Leavers, it's 33 favourable, 63 unfavourable. So almost a reverse between Remainers and Leavers. Now, the BBC simply cannot be doing its job correctly if it has split the country in terms of the view on the big issue of the day, being Brexit, and it's an issue that kind of feeds into a lot of other things. If the BBC is favoured on one side and unfavoured on the other of that, they simply cannot be doing their job right. Critically, of course, with that, the Leavers are more likely to be the older people who are the only people that actually still have a licence fee, pay a licence fee, and therefore what they're doing is not just annoying one half of the country, not meeting their impartiality obligation. They're ignoring the one half of the country who are most likely to be paying them a fee. Not really great customer service, that. I'm not going to say it's a conspiracy by the BBC to get itself shut down, but if they wanted a conspiracy to get themselves shut down, they should carry on doing exactly what they are today.
Indeed. Well, there's talk of a rival news TV channel being launched in the new year. Is it GB or something like that, or GB News or something like that? I think it's so that'll be interesting to see how that works out.
I would have thought over here, and I heard Ian Dow talking about this, saying, look, Sky News doesn't get a lot of support viewers, so why would you set up a new TV channel? Of course, Sky News doesn't get a lot of viewers because if you want to watch woke TV, you can watch the BBC already. You can watch Channel 4. There's a plethora of choices for woke TV. If you want something non-woke and something more to the right, you don't have a choice at the moment from a TV perspective. It will be this new channel. So I would have thought there's definitely a gap in the market for it. Whether I think people on the right are more likely to listen to the radio than watch the TV. If you look at the US, the TV tends to be more left wing, the radio tends to be more right wing. But we shall see. Good, more choice. Why isn't that bad? Why isn't that a good thing?
It'll be interesting to see how that works out. Well, Mike, we've got some interesting pieces up on our website that have gone up in recent weeks. Why don't you tell the listeners about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing, if you're listening to our podcast here, why not listen to our pubcast? So we've put a couple of pubcasts up in the last few weeks. One talking about COVID travels and our trips. Both of us had happened to take trips away in recent times and what it was like traveling in the time of COVID and some thoughts we had on that. They tend to be shorter. They tend to be just cover one topic. Have a little listen. Subscribe to our podcast there. And we've also recently spoken about Croydon Council finances. So similar to what we've already talked about today, but again, a few minutes worth having a listen to. On the website itself, we've had some great stories put up. So recently, and people writing for us. So recently, Dan Liddycott, who was the chairman of the UK Libertarian Party, he's no longer in that position, but that's a story for another day, perhaps. Dan wrote about state schooling and what's beyond that. We've mentioned already the schools have been closed for some months. Really asked what's the purpose of schooling, what we could perhaps do instead, how we could look at running schools differently. Worth having a read. Slightly provocative, but if schools have been closed for some months, why not use that for a rethink? And worth a read of that. We've got an interview with James Hunt of the Foundation Party. Now, the Foundation Party is a pro-Brexit, libertarian conservative party based mainly out of Kent, although they have a councillor in Essex as well, I think. Chris Mendes, formerly of Croydon Leave Campaign, is the leader of the party, and James Hunt is their chairman. So we've got an interview with James, really interesting, talks about what he's done in the past, different parties he's worked for, what his views are on politics generally, particularly how the party plans to go forward. So just on that, my intention, quoting here, is for the party in next year's local elections are to increase the number of council seats we currently have and increase the public awareness of a fresh, exciting political party out there providing radical opposition. Interesting party, interesting piece. Have a read of that if you wish. Couple of pieces by some chap called Swaddling. So firstly, had an outing on Sputnik Radio again. Great to talk to them. They asked me about COVID and the travel bans and the government's response and the way it's acting. I speak to them about that. A few quotes worth having a quick read. Something I genuinely do believe at the moment, I believe what's on there generally, but what I particularly feel at the moment is we've now created an industry of dealing with the pandemic. The pandemic isn't there in the same way anymore, but they still just need to find new things to do. And I think that's kind of where we are a bit with this now. But yeah, have a look on our website at that. I've also written an article on reclaiming liberty. I feel, and something I've mentioned a few times and we touch on regularly on the podcast, that we don't have people standing up for liberty. The government has come in and locked us down and banned protests and stopped people trading their businesses. They now force us to wear muzzles in shops and on transport. I feel they have hugely taken our liberty and no one has stood there against that. My article kind of talks about what we could maybe do about that and what pressure could be brought to bear on the government to give us back our basic rights. It's appalling that we're having to say this about a Conservative government. It's appalling that we're having to say this about Boris's government. And, you know, I counter the difference between the first 3 weeks of lockdown when we weren't sure it was going to hit us and where we are now when, you know, there are more hospitals than people in hospital with COVID, yet I can't go out the house or I can't get on a bus without a muzzle. You know, lots of businesses still can't trade properly. This is a ridiculous state of affairs. I think we need a party that stands for that, much like we had a party that stands for green issues, and the green agenda got on there, and a party that stood for leaving the EU, and we've now left the EU. I talk about that. Please have a read. Let me know your thoughts, and give feedback on generally any of the articles to us.
Yes, well, if you'd like to write for the website or have any stories you'd like us to cover, please do contact us. You can contact us via the Twitter @Croydon Const, via our Facebook page, via our website, croydonconstitutionalists.uk, or via email, croydonconstitutionalists@gmail.com. Well, do please subscribe to the podcast and indeed the pubcast. We've had a couple of ventures to the pub in recent weeks, and we've done a couple of pubcasts. So do please subscribe to that. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Do please like, share the podcast, and do please leave a review. It's always good to get feedback, and it helps others to find the podcast. Well, thank you once again for everybody for listening, and until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Stay safe, everybody.